I'd like to thank you for inviting me on the show. It's such an honour to be here, and I'd just like to say that when I'm not playing Xbox with my mate Thor, I really like to listen to my favourite podcast, Pop Culture Pasta. Hey Dave, I'm thinking about doing another revolution. Do you want to join up? I might need some help with organising the pamphlets though.
Pop Culture Pastor.
So Cody, I know that you're super excited about the rumors that Beyonce is remaking Jolene.
I am.
Dolly Parton classic Jolene. So she's really doing this country thing.
Oh, yeah.
Well, I mean, what even is country now?
That's a good question. So I think that it's very much wide open spaces.
Yeah.
To quote the Chicks. But
nice. Nice one.
Yes. Because you do have people that would fit your stereotypical 70s, 80s country music. You have people that are more almost rap or pop country. And then there's just random songs that are great to line dance to, evidently.
Is that a thing we still do? We're still line dancing out there?
On TikTok. It's been updated, though. Like, there's a lot more hands to boots.
There's guns. No guns. No guns. Yeah, well, you know, I was at a local eatery here in our little town, and they had like on one of those music video channels on their TVs, and it was a country channel, but it was, it sounded more like, it was like rappy. It's kind of rap.
Oh, yeah.
Not crappy, rappy. Although, but no. It was weird. I was like, oh, this is country, but apparently it's just this one little corner of country. I guess country is super wide now.
Oh, yeah.
Which is interesting to me because it wasn't, from what I remember. I grew up, the 90s, especially the early 90s, was dominated by Garth Brooks. And then Alan Jackson, George Strait, like this, kind of what I would call the twangy. There was the twangy country, and then there was Garth. That was kind of the two kinds of country.
Yeah, that's fair.
And I did appreciate some of it, especially Garth. I liked Garth.
Not Dwight Yoakam?
No, but he was great in The Wedding Crashers.
I was going to say, he's been in movies just randomly, and I'm like, I don't know who is the casting director, but bravo.
Yeah, he's great when he, and in the way he acts that scene at the beginning of Wedding Crashers, it influences Rebecca De Mornay to say a classic line, which is, "You shut your mouth when you're talking to me."
Yes.
Oh, okay. Hello. Good morning, afternoon, evening, whenever you're listening. This is a podcast. You can listen to it whenever you want.
Greetings and salutations.
This is Pop Culture Pastor, a podcast about pop culture stuff we like. And mostly we just like building community. So you may have met us at a Comic-Con. You may have never met us once. You just listen to the pod, and we appreciate that. And hopefully we will meet you someday.
If our paths shall ever cross.
Should twine they ever meet? I don't even know. I don't think that was really a word. Anyways, my name is Dave. Cody's here.
Yes.
And I had an idea for a little bit we can do every week to kind of start things off. And every week it'll be, we both bring something to the table that we want you to consume in pop culture, the other to consume. So for many, even years now, you may, if you listen to the podcast, Cody's been trying to get me to watch The Peacemaker, and I still haven't. And it's more of it's the thing now, because now I'm determined not to watch it, even though I kind of inside want to.
There's so many pop culture references made in Peacemaker. Yeah. The show is made for our show. So
there's so many things that we're intaking as far as pop culture that never come up on the show because we're both not watching them. So yes. I thought this would be a fun little segment we could do. And it doesn't have to take more than a minute or two.
It's going to take an hour.
Okay. Perfect. Perfect. Everyone's going to love this. So Cody, I'll let you go first. What am I missing? That could be the name of the segment. What am I missing?
Bingo.
Yeah. Bingo? I'm missing bingo? Or you just, okay, that was an expression.
Yes. So let me read you a brief synopsis.
Oh, this is perfect.
In 1977, a live television broadcast goes horribly wrong, unleashing evil into the nation's living rooms. What movie am I talking about? Oh, I'm glad you asked. This is called Late Night with the Devil, which on Pop Culture Pastor sounds kind of like, are you really suggesting this, Pastor Cody? I am, because it is technically a horror comedy.
Okay.
Because, like, very beginning, it gives you a brief background into why the events of Halloween night in 1977 are the way they are. But then it launches into a late night talk show, and it is done so perfectly. There's the stand-up intro jokes that delivered excellently. There's the guy that's the Ed McMahon of the show, who is like afraid and also makes some of the corniest jokes you've ever heard. And then there are these guests, and each one I'm like, oh, they nailed this casting, and they nailed that, because there's a guy that's like, someone here has lost a loved one whose name was Peterman, and like, you know, those charlatans that do that bit. And then there's a magician who's a skeptic, and he's out to disprove all these charlatans, and so he's like, I have a check for $100,000 if you can prove me that this is really supernatural. But then they have someone that was possessed by a demon that was being interviewed by a paranormal psychologist. And yeah.
You guys watch weird stuff.
All chaos breaks loose. But the first 2/3 of it is basically a late night talk show done perfectly.
But it's meant to be scary? Is it scary? Like a horror flick?
It's not that way till the very end.
Till the very end.
Like, the comedy is like perfect, and it puts you like you're at ease, and then boom, we ratchet up.
Okay. Here, I actually have thoughts on the devil depicted in pop culture. Okay?
Okay.
So, like, I think it's useful even if he's depicted in a certain way. One, super broken. Like, he got so hurt that he gave up on God. Like, you know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. Because I think we all kind of go through things like that. So, like, I appreciate that storyline. And then two, but that he does go, that he is evil incarnate. Because he gave up on God, because he bet on the separation from God, that he just cannot be, like, you know, some shows, some stories will try to make him the good guy. That I don't like that.
No, not this one.
This one sticks to the he's evil incarnate.
Well, the demon or whatever in this is clearly, you will regret what you asked for.
Okay.
That's how I'll word it.
Yeah, I used to love, I know this is weird, but when they made us read Faustus.
Oh, yeah.
In, you know, literature, classic literature. I actually loved that story. And it was not about the devil, quote unquote, per se, but the main character was a demon.
Yep.
And but I remember it had an impact on me. And there's this thing I always bring up when this comes to my mind, where so Faustus is a doctor, the demon is trying to make a deal with him. It's that old story. It's like, you know, what's his name at the crossroads? It's that story about making a deal with the devil.
Yes.
So you have some sort of skill or talent or whatever. And in this case, he's talking with the demon, and he asks the demon, it's like, well, if you're from hell, how come you're out of hell? And the demon basically says, do you think I, who've been in the presence of God, am not eternally tormented with 1,000 hells by being deprived of his presence? And I just thought, wow, that is super, like, poignant and just like really something to really dig in and think about. And I like it when bad guys are depicted as, tortured and broken in that they made this bad choice and they know they made a bad choice. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. And so in this one, you don't really get a whole lot of the demon. Demon's just kind of a piece that moves the story along, but you get the talk show host who basically is tormented by his choices that lead up to this moment.
Okay, cool.
So,
all right, what's it called again? And where do you find it?
Late Night with the Devil. And it is in theaters right now. Closest one to us.
Oh, it's in theaters. Okay.
Yes, we went to Kansas City and watched
All
it.
right. I am currently watching a show on Netflix. From the first trailer I saw this, I knew that this was going to be a show I had to watch. And this is like the synopsis is very small. It just says, a learned educator delivers a lecture shedding light on the three-body problem in a detail. Oh, that can't be it. That can't be the overview. That's not the right overview. That can't be the synopsis. I think they messed up on the old Google. Anyways, it's called Three-Body Problem.
I have seen bits and pieces of the trailer.
Yeah, must have cost them a lot of money. Clearly, they got a big budget. It's made by the makers of the people that were the showrunners on Game of Thrones. Hence, you see a lot of Game of Thrones actors in this. Also, Benedict Wong is kind of one of the main players in him, and he's just fabulous. And it's one of those shows that's kind of like you're supposed to be in mystery. For just a little while, you think, oh, is this going to be like about God? This is based on some old sci-fi novels that are apparently beloved. But we move away from the God aspect pretty quick when we find out what's kind of actually going on. But I'm about 3/4 of the way through the first season, which is what they put out, and I like it. I don't know that I'm super into the direction they went, but it's interesting at least.
So when the bits that I saw of the trailer, I'm like, Wongers?
Wongers is present.
And then I'm like, is he just now going to be cast as that supernatural guy that has some mysterious things going on?
Well, it's interesting because in this show, he's a detective. And he's like, you can tell he's kind of broken. Like you find out that his wife has passed on of cancer at some point, and he's just kind of a broken dude, but also very good at his job. But also very good at his job and getting mixed up in this, what appears to be kind of supernatural-ish, I can't really explain what's happening situation.
Without spoiling.
Yeah. Yeah, well, right. I mean, I could spoil it. If you watch the trailers, it's probably not a shock where it goes to you. You could probably figure it out, but I won't tell you.
Don't tell me.
Because it's worth watching. It's very slick. They spent a lot of money on it, so it looks good, and lots of great acting in it.
It's better be worth it because Netflix keeps hiking up their prices, and I'm not about that lifestyle.
I can't imagine that it was cheap. But yeah, 78% currently on Rotten Tomatoes for the Three-Body Problem. So yeah, check that out if you want to watch it. Maybe we'll talk about it sometime. Yeah, let's talk about a couple news items.
Oh, by the way, Rotten Tomatoes has my movie at a 97.
Oh, man.
Actually, take that back. Critic scores 96, audience scores 83. There's a part that I can see some of the audience not appreciating, but if you grew up with 70s scary movies, you'll get it.
Wow, okay. The Grammys have announced they're marking their 50th anniversary, the Grammy Hall of Fame.
Oh, snap.
By announcing who is going to be inducted into the Grammys Hall of Fame, which albums in particular. And the album that I want to bring to your attention is The Miseducation of Lauryn Hill by, obviously, Lauryn Hill.
It would have been funny if it was by someone else.
She of Sister Act fame, And the Fugees, if you're old enough to remember, I can't believe that those words came out of my mouth. It just doesn't seem like that long ago to me, but I know it was. But she was a member of a rap group called the Fugees, big in the 90s, with Wyclef Jean and Pras Michael, who has since come under charges again from the government on weird stuff. But we won't go there. I think we've talked about it once, but
Maybe.
Miseducation of Lauryn Hill, seriously, is one of my favorite albums of all time. One of the best albums of all time. I bought it anyways, even though she told white people not to buy her album. I don't know if y'all remember that. That was a big deal when it came out.
Dave breaking the rules.
I know. I hope I didn't disappoint Lauryn Hill because honestly, she just makes great music and I had to have it. But congratulations to her. Are you familiar with that album?
Only because you have talked about it, I don't know, maybe 1,000 times in my presence.
It's so good, bro. It's so good.
And so, yes, I am familiar. And I believe this album is worthy of Grammy Hall of Fame nom.
Yeah. If DJ was here, he'd tell you about it.
He would.
Other news, Boyd Holbrook, the big rumor, Boyd Holbrook of the most recent Justified TV season.
Of Sandman, a show that Dave refuses to watch.
No, I don't refuse. I'm going to watch it. He also was one of the bad guys in the new Indiana Jones movie that we will not speak of.
He was the bad guy in Logan.
Oh, yeah.
Which he was phenomenal as the bad guy in Logan.
He's very good as a bad guy. And I think he's very good because he can be kind of endearing as a character.
Oh, yeah.
In these moments, which I think makes this rumor perfect. Now, this is just a rumor. We don't know.
He also was in Narcos. Got to put that one out
okay.
there.
He's being considered to play Harvey Dent, Two-Face. Unclear of whether he would be Two-Face or just Harvey Dent in this next The Batman sequel.
So, you know how I feel about rumors.
Mm-hmm.
Not overly a huge fan of them. But this casting would be epic. And I would be here for it.
It really would be. I feel like Boyd Holbrook is just on the brink.
He's already to the moon in Team Cody's lineup of actors.
In your world, yes. But out there in the world, if you have to explain who he is still, he hasn't quite made it. And I feel like we're still in that place with him where I got to explain to people who he is.
I need Pedro Pascal to wrap his arms around him one more time and say, hey, this guy's good.
Did that happen?
Well, they were in Narcos together.
Oh, okay. I didn't know that. I've never seen Narcos.
I've seen
Is that the one about the Colombian drug lord guy?
I think they're Colombian. But yeah, the U.S. government is trying to stop the drugs, and the drugs keep coming across the border. And yes,
I've seen it.
We're in Sude America.
Okay, yeah. So you're in favor of this, obviously.
Yes,
I'm also in favor. I think Boyd Holbrook is a star, and I think sooner rather than later. He's gonna be the kind of guy that everyone knows who he is.
I know him, but I also watch Sandman.
He was about the only good thing in that Indiana Jones movie.
He was the only good thing.
Yeah, do we want one more piece of news? Why not?
One more.
Whoopi Goldberg,
Whoopi
from The View. I feel so stupid saying Whoopi Goldberg of The View, not Whoopi Goldberg, Oscar winner, not Whoopi Goldberg from The Color Purple, not Whoopi Goldberg from Ghost.
Jumping Jack Flash.
That we live in a world where I have to say Whoopi Goldberg from The View just kind of hurts me a little bit because Whoopi is clearly talented. Whoopi Goldberg, Guinan from Star Trek The Next Generation, the alien bartender.
I'm really feeling Jumping Jack Flash is where we should credit her for.
We could do a whole episode on Jumpin' Jack Flash. That was a great movie.
It was.
It was really good.
So shockingly, this is my mom couldn't tell you anything about 95% of the movies that were on when I was a kid. But this movie, you betcha.
It totally fits that your mom would be a Jumpin' Jack Flash fan.
So, yes, this is where my love of Whoopi Goldberg comes into play.
Okay. That's weird because it's one of those movies that we've heard of. Obviously, we're talking about it, but it kind of got lost to time. Most people listening to this are like, I don't know what you're talking about. Well, Jumpin' Jack Flash, I mean, other than being a Rolling Stones song,
yeah.
It was a movie with Whoopi Goldberg when she was like first, coming up. And it was good. It was like a caper, if I remember right. Like there's a murder mystery she's trying to solve.
Yeah.
Is she a journalist?
So she works with computers in a bank office.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
And she routinely talks with others via her computer. This is 1986, so talking on the computers is a big deal.
I've seen it 1,000 times, you guys.
But one day she connects with a mysterious user by the name of Jumpin' Jack Flash.
As one does.
It takes her a while to decode his message, but Terry figures out that Jack is a British secret agent trapped behind enemy lines.
Ah, that old chestnut.
Yes. Terry agrees to help him, but her activities attract the attention of the KGB.
Oh, no. Not the KGB. Was this an 80s movie? This had to have been an 80s
Yes.
movie. Yeah.
1986. Who want to know Jack's real identity and will kill to get it.
We were still feeling 1987. We were still very much feeling that Cold War. We thought it was pretty keen.
Oh, yeah. So,
Yeah. Seriously, if we ever want to do Red Dawn right and make a real remake, I know last week's show was remake, reboot, or nah, but I don't even consider that Red Dawn remake, the one they did here recently, that doesn't even count. That was so bad. But if we ever want to do it for real, I'm down. But you got to make it Cold War set. Just take it right back to the 80s.
oh, yeah.
Doesn't work nowadays, as we found out.
Now, that's a story that depends on there being a really big bad guy that's almost a realistic threat.
Vladimir Putin?
Well, I'm not naming it and claiming it.
Okay. Anyways, you're like, Dave, you brought up Whoopi. Whoopi was on her show, The View, and she says she's, done what the United States government refuses to do. And she says she confirmed that extraterrestrial life has made contact with humanity. She confirmed it. She said, I'm sorry. She said she told her co-host Wednesday that she is fully aware that aliens are among us on Earth. After the View guest Kumail Nanjiani said he believes in them. And she said this, quote, "I think they're waiting for us to clean up a little bit so that they can come here and tell us we're really messing things up." No, that was what he said. Then Whoopi said they're already here. She said calmly, they've been here for quite some time. And Kumail was stunned.
Kumail would be.
She just matter-of-factly, I don't know if she's been hanging out with
Tom DeLonge.
Tom DeLonge, the guys from Blink-182, or what. But Whoopi kind of matter-of-factly on The View today just, kind of outed that, oh, no, we've been in contact with aliens. She cited no sources. But these days, do you really need to?
No. Now I'm questioning, is she talking about like illegal aliens, immigrants, or is she talking about UFO outer space aliens?
No, she's talking about outer space aliens.
I will say my favorite conspiracy theory that you can't prove or disprove is octopus or octopi are aliens.
Yeah, I'm here for it. Why not?
Yeah.
I mean, we find things all the time that are super weird, though.
But these are super intelligent.
We think.
We know.
Can we prove that?
Yes.
Can they do my taxes?
Probably better than I can.
That's not saying much.
Ouch.
All right, let's take a break. When we come back, we'll talk about our main subject. We're doing another Legends episode. We'll be right back. Welcome back. We are going to talk about a legend, Cody.
Sweet.
A legend of pop culture. I think we had some sort of classification system. We planned on doing more episodes of this, and we just never got around to it.
It was a forgotten gem.
Yeah.
A diamond in the rough, if you will.
We did a legend episode on Sylvester Stallone.
For a while, he was the only worthy legend.
Yeah. You can go back and listen to it. It's in the 90s somewhere. Episode number 90s.
Oh.
Not years.
I'm like, I remember the 90s.
It's episode number 90 something. And I think our classification for being named a pop culture pastor legend was that a simple rule, just one little rule, was and in some way you defined the little piece of pop culture that you were standing on, right? So Sylvester Stallone was the action star. And not the only one. We could probably make a case for Arnold.
Yes.
Some others.
I do think that Sylvester Stallone definitely holds his own on especially the sports action star, because like Rocky technically is an action movie, but it's also a sport movie. So
today we're going to talk. We're going to go into a guy who did some writing and directing
and producing,
but nobody cares as much about that.
Tell that to Steven Spielberg and Jerry Bruckheimer.
Yeah, but that's not what they're known for. Well, Bruckheimer's pretty much known for that, but he will never be a legend.
Ouch!
You know what? I take that back. Bruckheimer and Simpson made some of my favorite movies. And they're turn off your brain movies, but they're fun turn off your brain movies. You give me The Rock, you give me some Armageddon, you give me these movies, I dig them.
And I think he's the one that produced the CSIs.
Did he really?
I think so.
That checks out. Okay, but that's not what we're talking about.
Not the Bruckheimer.
The legend we're talking about today comes in the realm of teenagers. Like, listen, let me tell you a little story, Cody. There's two different kinds of teenage movies.
Okay.
There's the movies like She's All That and Can't Buy Me Love, where it's some ridiculous premise about how some Hollywood actress is a nerd or an outcast, and then it turns out they're Patrick Dempsey.
Oh, yes.
They're McDreamy. And, he was just dressed nerdy. And, look at him now. He's super popular and attractive. And then the girl from She's All That was the same way. Lainey Boggs.
Yeah.
Oh, she's so hideous because she's wearing overalls and glasses. And then she somehow gets hooked up with the cool crowd. And, look, she's hot. But she always was.
A tale as old as time.
And those movies, while I think we may have enjoyed them, they're just a little condescending, aren't they?
A little bit.
And they don't give us a real picture because we all wanted. Here's the problem. Growing up and I watched Can't Buy Me Love, I wanted to be Patrick Dempsey because I was the loser guy. But the problem is underneath the stuff, I didn't look like Patrick Dempsey. I didn't have the cheerleader who was willing to pretend to date me to raise my popularity. Which all of that was a little insincere too. Like, that's not quite how high school actually worked.
You are at one of the outlier high schools.
So there's those movies that are a little condescending, a little not portraying the real high school teenage experience. And then there are John Hughes movies. And John Hughes is the legend that we're going to talk about today.
Oh, snap.
What's your experience level with John Hughes movies?
So with the John Hughes, I mean, I definitely have watched all the Brat Pack movies
Because
And-
you're younger, so I'm really curious to see how this is going to play out for you.
And so I will tell you, out of those movies, The Breakfast Club is my favorite.
Oh, very cool. Yeah.
Even though if you listen to last week's pod, you might be like, he's anti The Breakfast Club. He doesn't want a remake. Can't even imagine how you do it. I still can't. But otherwise, it's the writing and producing that I get a lot more of the fandom, because Home Alone, he's writing and producing. Uncle Buck.
Oh, yeah. We'll get to it. We'll get to the list. You don't got to list them.
And Beethoven.
Okay, we can just move past that one though. I'm not as interested in Beethoven.
How dare you?
Yeah, so I grow up with these movies and probably see them way too early. I'm probably way too young when I first see these movies, which may be the reason why we probably differ on The Breakfast Club. I think I was too young when I saw it the first time. So it wasn't, because it's a little bit more serious, it doesn't intrigue me and make me laugh like some of the other movies that I would see later on. But you probably see that older, right?
No.
No. How old are you, do you think, when you see The Breakfast Club?
I'm in grade school.
Wow. And
TNT
it's your favorite.
and TVS had all those movies, and I'm like, no, these people are hilarious or relatable. Looking at you, Emilio Estevez.
Oh, man, so relatable.
Yes.
No one more relatable than Emilio. Okay, so John Hughes, born in 1950, he's a baby boomer,
Yes.
which I think is super interesting because he's a champion of Gen X. Like, if there's anyone who champions Gen X and like almost chides boomers, like there's always in his movies this kind of thing where like, boomers, get out of the way for Gen X, which is why Gen X loves him so much. But then this guy's a boomer. That's pretty interesting, right? That he's so identified by Gen X.
Maybe he is like closer to that tail end where like older millennials can kind of appreciate some of the Gen X.
I mean, he was 30 in 1980. He was born in 1950.
Oh, I can't explain it then.
He just is one of those guys that seems to identify and just, he gets us. He gets Gen X, which is interesting. And he gets teenagers in the 80s because he's making these movies. And I think the reason people gravitated towards John Hughes flicks because, one, if they're not condescending. So many Hollywood teenage movies before and after have kind of fallen into this trap of teenagers are largely empty-headed, aren't concerned about real things, just like, kind of little monsters who are just dreaming about the girls and boys and things like that. And like largely there's like, look, some teenagers are like that, but he's not condescending. He makes movies about teens going through actual things teens went through back then. And I think that's why he's so endearing.
Also, I will say, I don't know who did the casting for his movies,
I think he did it largely.
but nailed it.
Yeah, we'll get to that in a little bit. He's born in 1950 to Marion Crawford, his mom, who was volunteered in charity work. That's her job, apparently. So she was probably a stay-at-home mom most of the time. And John Hughes Sr., who worked in sales. Wikipedia says he was the only boy, and he had 3 sisters. And he spent the first 12 years of his life in Grosse Pointe, Michigan, where he was a fan of the Detroit Red Wings.
Hockey.
You may remember that a Detroit Red Wing jersey is prominently featured in the film Ferris Bueller's Day Off, which is interesting because that's kind of a love letter to Chicago.
Yep.
And yet Cameron, his friend Cameron, who a lot of people say is kind of like a
stand-in
for John Hughes, is wearing a Detroit Red Wings jersey in that. Here is a quote. Now, so he spent a lot of time on his own because he had 3 sisters. He also says his neighborhood was full of girls. And so it led him to be kind of a quiet kid. And here's a quote that he gave in an interview. This is John Hughes. Quote, "I grew up in a neighborhood that was mostly girls and old people. There weren't any boys my age, so I spent a lot of time by myself imagining things. And every time when we get established somewhere, we would move. Life just started to get good in 7th grade, and then we moved to Chicago. I ended up in a really big high school, and I didn't know anybody. But then the Beatles came along and changed my whole life. And then Bob Dylan's Bringing It All Back Home came out and really changed me. Thursday, I was one person. Friday, I was another. My heroes were Dylan, John Lennon, and Picasso because they each moved their particular medium forward. And when they got to the point where they were comfortable, they always moved on." There's a lot of insight about this dude in just that quote. Number one, the thing that jumped out to me first is I like that he championed these guys that like really kind of reinvented themselves a lot.
Yeah.
Because like one of the things I love about the teenagers in his movies is, you ever notice his movies cover a very short time period?
Oh, yeah.
So you've got Weird Science, which is not very long, I think maybe a few weeks. Then you've got Ferris Bueller's Day Off, which is just a few hours, covers some hours in the day. 16 Candles covers a few days.
The Breakfast Club literally is just a day.
Yeah, just
Saturday
hours.
morning.
Mm-hmm. And even though it's these short periods of times, his characters are changed.
Oh, yeah.
And so I really dig that he recognizes that there are these moments in our lives that can change us drastically. And it's usually through inspiration. For him, it was through inspiration. He was inspired by Bob Dylan, John Lennon, and Picasso. And the teenagers in his movies are often inspired by other teenagers, other characters, and the people in the story. And I thought that was great. I think that was really cool. I also really love the idea of don't be afraid of being alone and bored. Kids are never bored these days.
Oh, yeah. Because, I mean, if you get bored, then you pull out your phone and you start scrolling and you scroll all the TikTok videos. And, yeah, you never get to dive into your own imagination or your own inner thoughts.
He basically, in this quote, describes himself as being lonely a lot of the time. And so he just sat around by himself imagining things. And then when I think about kids these days, I think, oh no, are we never going to have another John Hughes? Do you ever get scared of that?
Oh, not John Hughes in particular. But
Why? Why not? I want another John Hughes. I want one of the kids growing up today to be the next John Hughes.
I mean, I do worry that some of the creative arts are going to suffer significantly. Some of the philosophical ideas that come about, it seems like every century, that will cease. And I mean, clearly, film is suffering. If you read or believe the article that I quoted last week about like millennials and Gen Zers want original content that's quality, and oftentimes we're not getting that, and we're making remakes and reshoots and redos. And so Jackson, friend of the show, watched that new Roadhouse.
Oh, he watched the new Roadhouse.
It's Roadhouse in name alone.
Yeah.
That's
what I've heard.
His statement. And he's like, honestly, it was a one-off watch for me, and I don't know if I needed the one watch. And that's how it left him. And he was actually looking forward to it, where I, from the get-go, was like, this sounds ridiculous, like a cash grab. And so John Hughes movies, I think, bring up a sense of nostalgia and bring about, like, oh, each one of these has a unique thought, a unique story, and it creates change for the characters and for the audience, potentially.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it creates nostalgia very honestly, too, because I think if you were going to put a bunch of pop culture in like a time capsule and you wanted everything it to be to really encapsulize the 80s, there'd be a ton of John Hughes movies in there. Because I can't think of anybody that more clearly encapsulizes the 80s like John Hughes.
So I will tell you, growing up, because I told you I watched Breakfast Club at a young age and 16 Candles, all that jazz. But like if we were to do an 80s synopsis, it was a lot of action movies because that's what TBS and TNT kept showing was action movies. Mm-hmm. So you got all the Sylvester Stallone and Arnold Schwarzenegger movies. And then you got this group of movies by John Hughes, and then you throw in the Goonies, and that was like, that's what I assumed the 80s was like the whole decade.
You weren't wrong. That pretty much sums it up. You throw in a little Star Wars.
Yep.
Yeah, and you got it. You figured it. So John Hughes, as he grows into adulthood, it's funny, he goes to college, and then he gets a job at the Philip Morris headquarters working on ads for Virginia Slims.
Can't do that job
like
anymore.
Everyone in the 80s grandmother's favorite cigarettes. I need some Virginia Slims. Okay, Grandma, let's settle down. But he ends up working for like this kind of ad place, Needham Harper and Steers, advertising copywriter. But he also starts doing stuff for the Lampoon. The National Lampoon, which is where a lot of comedy people like back in the 70s got their start. And he starts doing this, and that ends up being kind of his way in because he writes all the National Lampoon movies. So he writes Vacation, European Vacation, Christmas Vacation. I mean, pretty much he even has writing credits on the new Vacation, the remake.
He does.
So like pretty
Which
much
threw me off. I'm like, he was dead.
I think they have to credit him
because he created the characters.
Yeah. He starts making these movies, and that's kind of his way in. And then he gets his big break by doing 16 Candles. My favorite story about 16 Candles. Let's first talk about it's 81% on Rotten Tomatoes, which I feel like it got hosed. Like how is 16 Candles only 81%?
I thought that it was being fair or maybe slightly generous.
What? That's terrible.
So I think my issue is it might be too much Molly Ringwald.
Really?
Yeah, you weren't expecting Molly Ringwald slander, but it happened.
No. Okay, so like you got to understand, Molly Ringwald was America's sweetheart in the 80s.
TBS said that she was during these movies.
Even when I was a kid, it was one of those things I remember thinking, really? I didn't really get it as a kid. Not that, she was just a girl. But for some reason, everybody loved Molly Ringwald. And she's actually John Hughes' muse for this run that he's on. So with 16 Candles, he's doing auditions for Breakfast Club, right? So Breakfast Club is actually the movie he writes first. He's writing that. And they're doing auditions for the roles in the Breakfast Club, and he comes across Molly Ringwald. So he takes her headshot, the acting headshot they do. He puts it on a board. He takes it home, puts it on a whiteboard, or maybe they didn't have whiteboards back then, but he puts it up on the wall, and he writes the 16 Candle script in 2 days. And for her. So she didn't audition for 16 Candles. He wrote it for her. I mean, that's incredible. Like, can you think of anyone else who had like a legitimate muse where just who they were, their face, whatever, really like it just sparked something in him?
I mean, you get these stories, but they are like lightning in the bottle, which technically, and it's a different dynamic, but Woody Allen with like Diane Keaton, kind of had that for a bit, but no, this is a lot more wholesome than Woodrow. So
yeah, if you're not aware of 16 Candles, I mean, everyone's aware of 16 Candles, right? I don't need to read the synopsis for this, do I?
For the younger audience,
For the culture. Let's do it for the culture. With the occasion all but overshadowed by her sister's upcoming wedding, angst-ridden Samantha, played by Molly Ringwald, faces her 16th birthday with typical adolescent dread. Samantha pines for studly older boy Jake, played by Michael Scheffling, who was 24, by the way, when he acted in this, but worries that her chastity will be a turnoff for the popular senior. Meanwhile, Samantha must constantly rebuff the affections of nerdy Ted, played by Anthony Michael Hall, who that part was also written specifically for him. The only boy in the school, unfortunately, who seems to take an interest in her. This movie came out in 1984, made $23 million at the box office. Molly Ringwald and Anthony Michael Hall were both 16 years old when they starred in this movie. Absolutely a classic movie. I just think I recently rewatched it with my oldest daughter, and there are parts that are a little cringy. Anything with Long Duck Dong.
I was going to say him as like just a stereotype.
Yeah. And we have no excuse for that, but for whatever reason, it took us longer in the pop culture realm to respect Asian Americans, especially in the way that you would hope. He's played for comedy and just with some pretty rough, broad generalizations of the Asian character.
I will say, like, it's weird in the early aughts. VH1 has an I Love the 80s show. Mm-hmm. And the guy that played him, makes several appearances whenever they mention a John Hughes movie. And so he would be occasionally on there. And, like, it was always, oh, beloved John Hughes actor. And I'm like, okay. He's in like maybe my third favorite movie out of this run of movies.
Yeah. What I love about the movie, though, that really holds up for me is just the heart that's present in a lot of John Hughes movies. At the heart of it, Molly Ringwald, character of Sam, she just wants to be noticed. She just wants to be seen. Jake Ryan is misunderstood as the popular senior. He just wants a real like relationship with someone. Clearly the one he's in with the cheerleader is not it. She doesn't really care about him all that much. Even Anthony Michael Hall's character is sort of endearing. His behavior, which is a little over the top, is caused by his desperation, which, like, look, if you can't relate to that as a teenager, I don't know what you can relate to. Because, like, yeah, desperation led us to act in certain ways.
Yes. Reckless ways.
John and Joan Cusack are in this movie. The siblings.
My favorite Hollywood siblings, maybe.
And the dad in this movie has, like, one of the best scenes, played by Paul Dooley, where they realize they've forgotten her birthday. And she's sleeping on the couch downstairs because the grandparents are there for the wedding and have kicked her out of her room. And he very sweetly apologizes and makes his heart known. And what I appreciated about this, Cody, is we're in the middle of the action man phase in the 80s.
Oh, yeah.
And here's a dad who is bearing his heart for his daughter, which is like the best thing you can do if you're a dad, by the way, and you have daughters, is to bare your heart to her. Tell her how loved she is. Show a softer side. I think it's one of the best things you can do. And it's a wonderful scene from Paul Dooley. So 16 Candles, one of my favorites in the John Hughes verse.
So I'm not going to lie. There was a movie I thought was in the John Hughes verse, and it wasn't.
Okay, what is it?
And I think it's just because John Cusack was in it. Say Anything. That's actually a Cameron Crowe movie.
Yes, Cameron Crowe. Although similar.
Yes,
Cameron Crowe is a very similar filmmaker and writer.
It was in that vein. Mm-hmm. And
I think Cameron Crowe would tell you he's highly influenced. Yeah.
Yes. So, yeah, and that was his directorial debut, but it felt like a John Hughes style movie.
Yeah. You're right. It did. 1985, the next year, The Breakfast Club comes out. We've talked quite a bit about that one already. 89% on Rotten Tomatoes. 5 high school students from different walks of life endure a Saturday detention under a power-hungry principal, played wonderfully by Paul Gleason, the late Paul Gleason, I believe. The disparate group includes Rebel John, played by Judd Nelson.
Judd Nelson was such a cool dude in this movie. I'm not going to lie.
Man, he was so cool. Everybody wanted to be him.
Yes.
Princess Claire, played by Molly Ringwald. Outcast Allison, played by Ali Sheedy. Brainy Bryan, played by Anthony Michael Hall. And Andrew, played by the aforementioned Emilio Estevez.
And unfortunately, I can never be Judd Nelson because I was too much Emilio.
Oh, come on. That's hilarious. I was more Anthony Michael Hall. I was Brian. Each has a chance to tell his or her story, making the others see them a little differently. And when the day ends, they question whether school will ever be the same.
Hopefully not.
Are you ready to be knocked off your feet?
Please.
This movie cost $1 million to make. $1 million. That was the budget. That's insane. In the day and age where we've got studios spending $300 million.
Like buku bucks on TV shows, let alone the movies.
Oh, man. Yeah, The Breakfast Club, maybe the classic teen dramedy of all time. And listen, this isn't one of my favorites. I think that is quite simply because of how young I am when I see it. It worked for you. It didn't work for me. I was looking for the funny stuff.
It might have been because I grew up in the 90s that was already like very cynical.
Yeah, that's good. That could be.
And I also was living the Attitude Era. So
I recognized it as a good movie. I recognized it as a good portrayal of high school life. I think the part that I couldn't identify with, even when I watched it as a teenager, is that these people are supposed to be the losers of their high school, and they all seemed like winners to me. Judd was cool. The jock obviously is cool. The girls are cool. Even Ali Sheedy.
I was going to say Ali was the one that, like, okay, you're quiet, but you're still an attractive young girl.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know why we are unpopular.
Anthony Michael Hall's hilarious. Like, you know what I'm saying? It was hard for me to look at these people and identify with them as losers, outcasts, anything like that. So, then in 1985 as well, he comes out with a movie called Weird Science, starring Kelly LeBrock, Anthony Michael Hall, Ellen Mitchell Smith, Robert Downey Jr., Bill Paxton. Here's the description. Only 60% on Rotten Tomatoes, which feels like a knife in my heart.
I think it's because of the time that we're reviewing.
Yeah. Teen misfits Gary, played by Anthony Michael Hall, and Wyatt Ellen Mitchell Smith designed their ideal woman on a computer, because that's something you could do back in the 80s.
We talked about the computer sciences from Jumping Jack Flash, and so I believe it.
A freak electrical accident brings her to life in the form of the lovely superhuman Lisa, played by Kelly LeBrock, which, I mean, superhuman's about what you could describe her as.
And she ended up, for a brief moment, with 80s, early 90s heartthrob Stevie Seagal.
That's right. She did, because she did a movie with him. But for real, like so Kelly LeBrock is known for, like, she's a model. she does like, remember the commercials? You may not remember these.
I do, because I'm an 80s child.
Don't hate me because I'm beautiful.
Yes.
I don't even remember what those were for.
I don't either.
But she was so impossibly good looking. I think she fooled an entire generation into thinking that there were lots of her out there.
There's just one Kelly LeBrock.
But then, the funny thing, Kelly LeBrock got old, just like everyone else.
Happens to the best of us.
It does. But she outfits Gary and Wyatt in cool clothes, surprises them with a Porsche, helps them stand up to jerks. Ian, played by Robert Downey Jr., and Max, played by Robert Rusler. But all the while, the boys must hide Lisa's existence from Chet, played amazingly by Bill Paxton, Wyatt's nightmare of a big brother. This is one of my sentimental favorites of the John Hughes library. This movie was on repeat with me and my cousins and my friends who I hung out with the most. I loved this movie and still quote it probably daily.
So the weird thing for me is looking back at the cast, and it's like, okay, Robert Downey Jr.'s the bully, but you look at like Anthony Michael Hall now,
yeah,
and like Robert Downey Jr. now, and you're like, oh, like this would be a reverse movie, like Anthony Michael Hall would be the bully.
Yeah, seriously, there's this weird thing that happens to all like the teenage stars of most of these movies is for a little while they kind of drop off the radar. And then when they come back, like when Anthony Michael Hall came back in Edward Scissorhands, we were all like, oh, whoa, who's that guy? And what, did that guy eat Anthony Michael Hall? Not in a bad way. He was buff.
He was.
I mean, he just got yoked. And we were just like, dude, what happened to Farmer Ted?
Like even he was in an episode of Community,
Yeah,
where
as a bad dude, as a bully.
As a bully that tries to start a fight with Joel McHale. Like, I'm like, oh my goodness, this is that guy.
Yeah, he made a second career out of being a bully. He was in Psych, I think, wasn't he in Psych?
Yeah.
Episodes of Psych. Yeah, so Anthony Michael Hall kind of turns into a yoked bully, which is weird. And yeah, Robert Downey Jr. But back then, I mean, Robert Downey Jr. was perfect for this role.
Oh yeah,
he was like the spoiled rich kid, which
he was
kind of maybe was his life. But he was hilarious. Like, I don't think people that are all like happy for Robert Downey Jr. now, if you were born after 2000 and you're happy for Robert Downey Jr., that's great. You should be. But people that are old enough to remember him and what he's been through, we're really happy for him because he was the guy that like you have so much potential guy. As he's like just falling apart with drugs and everything else, everyone's like, oh man, this dude was so talented. He was on SNL at a really young age.
So he was on the cast that they killed off.
Yeah.
That was the thing that SNL did because evidently that cast, like it had big names for like people that would go on and be incredible actors. It just wasn't funny, evidently.
Well, and there were problems behind the scenes, which this was the thing with Robert Downey Jr. is like just all the talent in the world. But he had to go through what he went through. And so seeing him in this movie, he looks like so young, and this movie's great. This is a movie I won't rewatch with my daughters.
Nope.
Because it is one of the movies that doesn't hold up real well as far as how Lisa is treated, how Kelly LeBrock. I mean, they make a girl with their computer. I mean, where do you think that goes?
Some dark places.
It does not hold up well in the realm if you want your daughters to learn that they are not objects. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But I don't know when it comes. Let's talk about this right now, Cody. Can we be honest with ourselves enough to laugh at ourselves though, and realize that like there are things about us as humans in the past and now even that we do that aren't real endearing, aren't nice, aren't kind, but we can like point at ourselves and kind of laugh at it still? Because I can still watch this movie and say this is a funny movie, while also saying, yeah, some parts are kind of cringy because they don't hold up.
And I do think that these movies that don't stand the test of time, if you will, are a good time capsule of that time period, and also shows the growth of either you, the individual that's taking in this media, or us as a culture. Although us as a culture, I don't think we've actually grown. I think we just like to.
Yeah, we pretend.
Yes.
Yeah, because here's the thing. Yes, this movie can be kind of cringy in spots, but guess what? Teenagers are kind of cringy.
Oh, yeah. Working in schools, I hear things. I'm like, you can't be saying that.
I got news for you. When we were teenagers, we were pretty cringy.
Oof.
John Hughes ain't wrong. That's the endearing thing about his movies is he manages to paint teenagers in an honest sense, which is, hey, they're deeper than you're giving them credit for, and also they're still pretty cringy and immature.
It's just crazy to me that he directs Breakfast Club and Weird Science like in a very short time frame,
Back to back.
Yeah.
They're they're pretty much tonally pretty completely different movies.
Oh yeah,
but they're beloved. They're beloved. 1 year later, 1986, a lot of people say this is his best. Ferris Bueller's Day Off, starring Matthew Broderick. Here's the synopsis: 82% on Rotten Tomatoes. You all right with that? 82.
I mean, I would put it above Pretty in Pink, or not Pretty in Pink, but 16 Candles. And so, I mean, if 16 Candles is an 80, then yeah, this is an 82.
All right. Ferris Bueller, played by Matthew Broderick, has an uncanny skill at cutting classes and getting away with it.
Oh, you sneaky dog.
Intending to make one last duck out before graduation, Ferris calls in sick, borrows a Ferrari, and embarks on a one-day journey through the streets of Chicago. On Ferris's trail is high school principal Rooney, played by Jeffrey Jones, determined to catch him in the act. This came out June 11th, 1986, made $70 million at the box office. It's one of John Hughes' most beloved movies, I would say. Alan Ruck as Cameron, Mia Sara as his girlfriend Sloane, even Jennifer Grey's in this as the sister.
Yes.
A lot of people. Charlie Sheen shows up.
I was going to say the guy that drinks tiger's blood.
Edie McClurg, who appears in a lot of John Hughes movies as a secretary in this movie.
Yes.
The zips, the weirdos, the freaks, they all love him. They all think he's a righteous dude. I love Edie McClurg. She was the best. This is a great movie. Christy Swanson appears in this movie as well. Very young Christy Swanson. And where are you at with Ferris Bueller, Cody? Just one of your favorites?
It was on a lot, and like if it is on and there's nothing else on, I'm not upset watching it. But it's not one that I go out of my way to watch.
This one gets into I think the reason we liked this when we were young in the 80s is it gets into almost our, if The Breakfast Club is an honest take on teenagers, Ferris Bueller is like what teenagers saw when they looked in the mirror.
Yes.
We all thought we were Ferris Bueller, but actually we were Cameron. I think if we're being honest. And we said that Cameron's kind of like a stand-in for John Hughes as a teenager in this movie.
Yes.
But yeah, there were no Ferris Buellers. I didn't know anyone that was like Ferris.
And we don't need a Ferris Bueller sequel.
No, but they did. So plenty of these, they tried making TV series out of them. There was a Ferris Bueller TV show. None of them are successful, by the way. There was an Uncle Buck. They tried to do an Uncle Buck.
Unless you have John Candy playing Uncle Buck.
They did not.
Yeah, that was your issue.
Ferris Bueller is one of his most beloved movies, John Hughes. In 1987, he does something completely different.
He goes adult.
Yeah, he makes a story about adults, starring his friend, John Candy. This is one of my favorite John Hughes stories, is that him and John Candy are actually they develop a really incredible friendship. They spend holidays, their families together. They go, John Hughes goes to John's house in Canada for like summer vacations, which makes me think of the great outdoors, which I'll bring up later.
Yes, we will.
But planes, trains, and automobiles. Here is the synopsis. Easily excitable Neil Page, played by Steve Martin, is somewhat of a control freak, trying to get home to Chicago to spend Thanksgiving with his wife and kids. His flight is rerouted to a distant city in Kansas because of a freak snowstorm, and his sanity begins to fray. Worse yet, he is forced to bunk up with talkative Del Griffith, played by John Candy, whom he finds extremely annoying. Together, they must overcome the insanity of holiday travel to reach their intended destination. This came out November 25th, 1987, right around Thanksgiving. It is a Thanksgiving movie, 92% on Rotten Tomatoes. I couldn't agree more. I actually think this movie has one of his most heart-filled movies. Even though it's played for laughs, there's a lot of comedy. By the time you get to the end, you realize you've seen something that's sort of profound, I think.
Yeah, this one is... So there's not that many Thanksgiving movies, but this is probably the best Thanksgiving movie. Sorry, son-in-law. Yes, this is not only a great Thanksgiving themed movie, but it also has two iconic actors that are delivering it phenomenally on this script, in which, I mean, John Hughes has his fingerprints all over it because he's writing it, he's directing it, he's producing it. It is John Hughes mania, and it honestly might be John Hughes at his best.
Yeah, and I agree. We've talked for 30 minutes on how this dude defined the teen genre. And I actually think this is his best movie, and it's got the most to say. This is wonderfully and brilliantly written. You spend 3/4 of the movie empathizing with Neil Page, Steve Martin's character. You want him to get home. You want him to make it home to his family, and the script is trying to do that to you. And John Candy's character, Del Griffith, is presented as extremely obnoxious and annoying. You're annoyed with him. You understand why Steve Martin's character is annoyed, and you're kind of on his side. And then at the end is so wonderfully and brilliantly written that you realize that Neil Page kind of sucks. Steve Martin's character kind of sucks, and that you are more like Steve Martin rather than the other way around, and that you kind of suck. And basically, the whole story is saying we should empathize with people more. We get wrapped up in our own little things, and we should slow down and try to see people for where they're at. Instead of seeing the things that annoy us about them, see why they got that way. And I just think it's beautiful. It's like one of the best stories.
So, winner, winner, TV dinner.
I don't know what that means. But that's an instant rewatch for me every Thanksgiving. She's having a baby, which was a big deal in 1988, but kind of flopped.
That's a blind spot for me.
Yeah, it was a big deal. I remember they advertised it a lot. 44% on Rotten Tomatoes. Jake, played by Kevin Bacon, and Christy Briggs, played by Elizabeth McGovern, have made the leap from high school sweethearts, right, to newlyweds. But married life is not what Jake expected. While he fantasizes about a dream girl and envies the lifestyle of his single best friend, Alec Baldwin.
Don't empathize or wish for Alec Baldwin's life.
Christy is ready to have a baby. Instead of sharing this with Jake, she opts to secretly stop taking birth control. However, Christy comes clean after failing to become pregnant, prompting Jake to go to a fertility clinic. Hijinks ensue. This one didn't hit like I think everyone thought it would. And maybe it's because they're not, he thought he could do another maybe real story with adults.
I'm not going to lie. You look through some of the older adults in this, and they're recognizable faces.
Yeah.
And some recognizable names. Looking at you, Paul Gleason again, Bill Irwin. And like you just scroll through and it's like, oh, this has the makings of potentially a good movie because you have John Hughes writing, directing. You have
Kevin Bacon was a star by this point.
the Bacon. You have the Baldwin. I don't know Elizabeth McGovern well enough to.
She was supposed to be huge. I think when this movie came out, they thought she was going to be a star. I'm not really sure what happens. I know she's in other things. And then I recall like not thinking about her again until Downton Abbey comes out. And she's like the matriarch of Downton Abbey. And I'm like, oh, hey, look, it's Elizabeth McGovern.
Yeah, I'm scrolling through her IMDb and I'm like, she was in an episode of Tales from the Crypt.
Yeah.
That's what I might know her from.
So an interesting little miss there from John Hughes, but then he hits back big. 1989, a movie called Uncle Buck.
Yeah.
Only a 62% on Rotten Tomatoes, which kind of floored me.
You all are fascist.
Cody's going hard.
That are rating it that low. I mean, if we have 16 candles at an 80, Uncle Buck has to be in the mid 80s.
Yeah, I would think so too. I don't know why this movie is rated so low. Here's the synopsis. When Cindy and her husband Bob have to leave town for a family emergency, there's only one person available to babysit for their 3 kids. Bob's lazy, carefree brother, Buck, played by John Candy, while he immediately gets along with the 2 younger children, played by Gabby Hoffman and Macaulay Culkin. Buck must change his bachelor lifestyle if he wants to be a responsible caregiver for the angst-filled teenager Tia, played by Jean Louisa Kelly. Came out in 1989, made $79 million at the box office. It's our first real Macaulay Culkin movie that we really recognize him and see him in. Of course, John Candy's one of our favorites here on the pod. Laurie Metcalf's in this. Anna Chlumsky makes an appearance in this movie.
That's a name.
This movie for me, there's a theme in John Hughes movies too, where the guy or gal in society that we would say is a loser, that society would say is a loser, there's something about them that makes them endearing and that it's worth something, right?
They're actually redeemable.
Yeah, Buck Russell in this movie is a loser by all society standards. And yet, by the end of the movie, we lift him up, and John Hughes had a knack for this. We lift him up and say there's something about him that is worthwhile, that we should aspire to.
And not just the fact that he makes like the biggest flapjacks this side of the Mississippi.
Question. Do you think it's even possible to make a movie like Planes, Trains, and Automobiles and Uncle Buck without John Candy? Is half of this just because John Candy's brilliant?
I don't know if you can reach the heights that those 2 movies.
Like if you're remaking Uncle Buck or Planes, Trains, and Automobiles, who plays those characters? I mean, what? Kevin James?
I was going to say Jack Black.
Jack Black? Someone, he's got to have that quality in him, but none of them has it like John Candy did.
Yes, because like Jack Black, although he's kind of endearing, he's not overly endearing to me. And oftentimes he comes across like just...
He's super manic.
Yes.
Yeah.
Manic. That's the word that I would use to describe him. And sometimes his manicness, it's not like the Robin Williams manicness that it was like, oh, this is funny, it's going somewhere. Sometimes it just, with Jack Black, it stalls out and it doesn't make me laugh.
Yeah. Kevin James doesn't have the vulnerability.
No.
So like where John Candy probably, you figure he grew up overweight. And so he's got this vulnerability of, he's been hurt. Whereas Kevin James seems more like the guy who was a jock in high school and just gained weight when he went to college and was still super cool. And therefore just doesn't quite have that vulnerability to him. So I don't know if he can pull that off. It'd be a different character.
It would be.
I loved Uncle Buck. I thought it was a great movie. His last movie that John Hughes directs is Curly Sue in 1991.
Which, that's kind of tragic.
Yeah, 13% on Rotten Tomatoes. 13.
Is it because it has America's least favorite Belushi?
That is severe Jim Belushi slander. He's at least a little endearing, isn't he? I mean, when the worst thing you can say about a guy is he's not his brother.
Yes.
Well, he's not John. John's dead and now Jim's still alive.
So,
quote by his parents. No. I take that back. That was a terrible joke.
but I know I've heard that joke made in TV. Like, that's a thing. It's weird, the hatred of Jim Belushi. But I mean, this movie, I don't remember it. I know I've watched it. So that tells you how much I cared about it.
Yeah.
But the fact that he stops directing movies in 1991. Yeah. So
that's wild, isn't it? But he was a writer by trade. Like that was his thing.
And I mean, he definitely kept on writing, and the writing credits are astonishing. But he directed some very iconic movies across, I guess, multiple age ranges and storytelling methods.
Yeah. Okay, I don't want to bring up all the stuff he wrote because there's a ton of it.
Beethoven.
I want to give you room, though. Give me your favorite things, your favorite kind of the under the radar type stuff that he wrote that maybe a lot of people don't know of. This would be like a best of the rest. So it's easy to rattle off his directing movies, like the John Hughes directed movies. But there's so many more that he wrote that maybe people don't know about, or maybe they do, but let's take the time to appreciate them.
Okay,
give me a few of them.
The Home Alone movies.
Definitely.
Which that's how we get John Candy as Gus Polinski. Is because of that connection. Dennis the Menace. So in the writing movies that I'm highlighting early on, he has shifted from like teenage coming of age movies, like high school movies, to kids, young families. So Beethoven, Home Alone, Dennis the Menace. He did the screenplay for 101 Dalmatians, Flubber. So, like, classic, beloved movies of kids that grew up in the 80s and 90s, as myself. Yes, no, those movies are phenomenal.
Yeah, I agree. They weren't in my wheelhouse because I was too old for them when they came out, but I recognized that they were a big deal.
And then the vacation movies, like you said, including Christmas Vacation, which is always in the running for one of my favorite Christmas movies, even though I am a huge Home Alone fan.
They have the ultimate hallmark of the John Hughes, where I think on the outside looking in, none of us are sitting here like, oh, Clark's a really good dude.
Yep.
No, he's super flawed, but it's got heart. You see the heart of his characters. And it's a reminder of how we should look at each other as humanity is, yes, we're all broken, but there are redeeming qualities about all of us. There's something inside all of us that we should be able to look at and say, that's a good thing about you.
So the one movie that's on this list that I'm like, oh, you made this? You wrote this? Made in Manhattan. I know some people really love it. And it might be because I don't think J-Lo is a tremendous actress.
Yeah.
Maybe that's why this film suffers. But
at least she wasn't back then. I think she got better as an actress as it went along. I mean, she got a little better.
Maybe a smidge.
She was pretty good in, what was the movie she with Clooney? And the ex-KU football player was in it, Keith Loneker. It was a spy movie, I think. I thought that movie was pretty good. Anyways, go on.
He also wrote Drill Bit Taylor, which I forgot about.
Oh my goodness. Owen Wilson?
Yeah. So
I'm about to blow your mind.
Please do.
Here's one that you're not going to find on that list. That's IMDb, right?
It is IMDb.
Here's one that you didn't know he wrote because it's not going to show up on IMDb, and there's a reason for that. It's a 1994 movie.
Okay, I'm scrolling back. 1994, the only two films: Baby's Day Out and Miracle on 34th Street.
Right. So it's not going to be on that list. And there again, I'm going to tell you the reason. He actually writes a script for a movie called Dumb and Dumber.
What?
Yes, John Hughes is the original script conceptualizer for the story and movie that becomes Dumb and Dumber. He ends up selling it to the Farrelly brothers. The reason it doesn't show up in his IMDb is because he asked them that he not be credited for it.
That's a game changer.
Yeah. So he has a hand in one of our, clearly that's like a favorite 90s movie for a lot of people your age, I would imagine.
Oh, yeah.
And my age too. We love Dumb and Dumber. And so I thought that'll blow your mind that he actually, you add that to his list of writing because he absolutely probably should have been credited for it, even though I'm sure the Farrellys put a chunk of their own spin on it, which clearly they did. They have their own kind of humor signature.
Yes, but if you watch the sequel, you're like, there's something missing.
Yeah. Yeah, there is. Okay. So the movies I was going to point out that he wrote, did not direct, that maybe you're not familiar with. Number one, I already mentioned it, The Great Outdoors.
Love that movie.
Oh, it's so good. Another John Candy starter. Comes out in 1988 with Dan Aykroyd, Annette Bening. It's just so good.
I want that lamp.
I wanted to go on that vacation. I wanted to go to the lake and be in that town.
Go to that steakhouse.
Again, John Hughes does this thing with teenagers where, like, he writes the teenage romance in this so well with the boy from the upper middle class home in Chicago comes up to this small town and falls in love with the small town girl who's got she's got her own struggles, you know, and at first she doesn't want anything to do with him because he represents everything she hates, you know. It's just so perfect and so real. Like, I think if maybe you couldn't identify with it, you knew someone who could.
Oh, yeah.
And I just loved The Great Outdoors. The other movie, and this one's going to fly under a bunch of people's radar, is a movie called Dutch. Now, Dutch only gets 17% on Rotten Tomatoes, but the audience score is 93%. Stars Ed O'Neill, who is right in the middle of his Married with Children fame when this movie comes out. Ethan Embry. It stars Christopher McDonald as Ethan Embry's real dad, who is let me read you the synopsis. Working man Dutch, played by Ed O'Neill, is dating the divorced Natalie, played by America's 80s mom, Jo Beth Williams. And he offers to drive her stuffy 13-year-old Doyle, played by Ethan Embry, from his private school in Atlanta to his mother's home in Chicago for Thanksgiving. It's another Thanksgiving movie. Doyle's not interested as he blames Natalie for the divorce, wants nothing to do with mom's new boyfriend, especially given the man's lowly working class roots. This pairing makes for a journey filled with bickering, mishaps, and eventually bonding. And you guessed it, it's another one of these movies that has just this heart underneath the surface. The kid's very stuck up, doesn't like mom's new boyfriend because he's in construction. You later find out he owns the construction company and is super rich. But it's such a good movie. It has a lot in common with Planes, Trains, and Automobiles. It's basically a road movie. And it's really, really good. I loved this movie. Apparently, a lot of people didn't.
Yeah, I don't think I've ever seen it.
I want to hear from our listeners, though. If you know what movie I'm talking about when I say Dutch, starring the guy from Married with Children, and you liked it, let me know. It'd make me feel better.
I feel like there's a lot of bikers that might have got their name from this movie.
All right. Anything else you want to say? I think John Hughes is an undisputed legend.
Yes. So he definitely defined the 80s teen movies that honestly, when you go back and look at the 80s, you have to mention them. And then his writing credits, from serious movies to adult comedies to the best of potentially the children and young family comedies. And then you find out that he has a hand in Dumb and Dumber.
Yeah. His writing credits might be more impressive.
Oh, yeah.
Like I feel like you gotta take his directorial movies first and kind of examine those to understand like his place in the zeitgeist. But he's prolific as a writer.
And so I think that him writing, directing, and producing several of those movies that he directed definitely influenced some people that have tried to do it, and I don't think that many have done it well. Kind of looking at you, M. Night, at times.
He definitely does influence teenage comedies, though.
Oh, yeah.
Every teenage comedy that comes after that era has a little piece of John Hughes in it, or at least John Hughes imitation.
Like I said, Say Anything, I thought it was a John Hughes movie.
Yeah.
And it wasn't.
Yeah. So, yeah, tell us what you think of John Hughes. Where does John Hughes fit in your pop culture fandom?
And when are we going to hang his picture up in the rafters?
Oh, we should totally have Legends banners.
We should.
We need a Sly Stallone poster and a John Hughes poster. Stat.
Or make at least a commemorative quilt.
Hey, before we go, we need to update our cereal brackets. I bet some of y'all were just waiting for that.
That was the whole reason I even came on the show tonight.
All right. Cinnamon Toast Crunch in a victory I don't think anybody was surprised by. Took down Lucky Charms.
So I think Cinnamon Toast Crunch is more of an adult and kid cereal, where Lucky Charms is geared really towards the youngins.
Yeah, I still like Lucky Charms. Although most kids these days, I don't even think they like Lucky Charms. Kids these days just like, well, just the marshmallow. All marshmallows. I'm like, well, that's not cereal. It's marshmallows.
And you're going to have 15 cavities.
So Cinnamon Toast Crunch is your first Final Four contender. They'll be going up against Fruity Pebbles. Fruity Pebbles took down Reese's Puffs.
That was ridiculous.
Oh, Cody's mad.
Oh, yes.
He is angry.
Like, for real.
For reals.
Have you had Fruity Pebbles?
Yeah, they're all right.
They're not good.
Then what are you mad about?
Well, they beat Reese's Puffs.
Oh, you're saying Reese's Puffs were that good.
Like, you can eat Reese's Puffs dry. You can eat it with milk. You can even eat it when it gets soggy.
Well,
like, the best thing about Fruity Pebbles is you can make the Fruity Pebbles version of Rice Krispie treats.
I made a post in the Pop Culture Pastor community group airing my grievance against Honey Nut Cheerios. Air your grievances.
I am not creative enough to make banners and signs.
The next Final Four contender took down Frosted Mini Wheats, and that is Honey Nut Cheerios, which is an abomination. I don't care what any of you say. Honey Nut Cheerios is good for animals and nothing more.
So I honestly thought this is probably where Honey Nut Cheerios run should end.
Yes.
But the anti-Dave backlash, because so usually I'm the one that has the hot takes that are controversial. And this time it's you, and so I am cheering for the anarchy.
Yeah. Chaos. He's a chaos merchant.
Yes.
Yeah, I think me not liking Honey Nut Cheerios has kind of spurred it on. It's like the Howard Stern of cereals.
It is.
Frosted Flakes in the other matchup took down Cap'n Crunch. I don't even know what y'all are doing anymore. What are we doing here?
I actually agreed with that one.
I don't. Cap'n Crunch forever, man. So this is the Final Four matchups you get to vote on this week. Cinnamon Toast Crunch will go up against Fruity Pebbles, and Honey Nut Cheerios will go up against Frosted Flakes. I don't even care who wins that. And except for if it's Honey Nut Cheerios, we're ending the podcast. It's over.
I will say that the second half of the bracket, that's very adult cereals. Honey Nut Cheerios and Frosted Flakes?
I mean, I guess. I mean, what happened? We had Cookie Crisp over there in that side of the bracket, Apple Jacks. We had Honey Smacks, Cocoa Krispies. How'd we end up here?
I don't know. But it's great.
It's very stressful for me. All right. What do you think about John Hughes? What do you think about the cereal March Madness bracket? Don't forget to vote in those. You need to join the Pop Culture Pastor community group on Facebook.
Especially if you're outraged about this Honey Nut Cheerios.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely join the group, especially if you're outraged, so you can vote it down. Vote for the other one. All right. Don't forget to subscribe if you're not subscribed. Give us a rating. That really helps. If you're listening on Apple, you can go down to the bottom, give us a 5-star rating, and then give us a comment so people know it's not just us rating ourselves.
Yes. I mean, I can be very creative, but I don't want to rate me.
Spotify, you can rate us too, but no reviews. You can just give us 5 stars.
Oh, okay. Well, I'm not going to rate or review us.
If you listen to us on Good Pods, you can rate every episode.
Oh.
And then if you're on YouTube, which that's a new thing I keep forgetting about, we are on YouTube. Make sure when you watch the video, you like it, give it the thumbs up, and also subscribe to us there too, because every little bit helps the algorithm.
And then leave comments like, great pod.
Thank you.
High five.
High five. We will high five you back through YouTube.
Yes.
All right. We'll see you next week.